Hi everyone, Troy Lambert here of Plot Geek Academy, and today we're going to answer the question, what is a hook? In the narrative sense, not the pirate who's lost his hand sense. Anyway, a hook is an element, any element of a story that grabs the reader's attention and works to keep them reading or to start them reading the book. Okay. Hooks are crucial to engaging readers. It keeps them invested in your story from the first sentence to the very last one. Now, there are all kinds of types of hooks, and we're going to talk about a few of them. The first one is a conceptual hook. This is the premise of the story itself. It's what makes it unique or compelling, and this is the type of hook that gets the reader to purchase your book in the first place. It tells them, hey, this is a book that you really want to read, and by the way, this is going to be one that you can't put down because you're going to want to know how this premise turns out. How do we make this work? And we'll look at some examples of that in a little bit. The second one is an opening line hook. This is a strong or surprising first sentence that sets the tone for the rest of the book, but it gets the reader engaged right away. If you can do that with one sentence, not the first paragraph, not the first page, but a first sentence, you'll have that reader hooked and at your mercy. Now, of course, you have to continue using great hooks throughout your story to keep them engaged. An opening line is what gets them started. Now, a character hook, a fascinating or relatable character who immediately connects with the reader and they immediately feel empathy for, that type of a hook can really get the reader invested in the entire story. They want to know what happens to this character. This character is someone that they either find just absolutely fascinating to watch, like Hannibal in Silence of the Lambs, or someone that they relate to because it relates to something that they've experienced in their lives. Okay? So a character hook is a really great thing to have, and you should have characters that hook the readers. But you're also going to use things like emotional hooks or narrative hooks. And this is where you're going to create an emotional or a narrative pull that resonates with the reader's feelings or causes them to want to know what happens next. Remember that your books are often a series of cause and effect. This happens and then this happens. If this, then what? If this, then what? You're going to do that over and over again. And that then what is the hook that keeps the reader turning the next page or reading the next chapter. And it makes it so they have a difficult time stopping reading your work. Now, why do hooks matter in fiction writing? Well, we talked about that a little bit already, but let's break it down a little bit. First of all, is grabbing the reader's attention early. We're in an era of short attention spans. Thank you, TikTok. And the hook is essential to catch the reader quickly and get them engaged in the story right away. If you don't catch their attention right away, you lose them. As a friend of mine says, if you bore me, you lose me. If you bore me, I'm out of the story and I don't want to keep reading. But that speaks to sustaining interest as well. Good hooks aren't just for the beginning. They need to be woven throughout the narrative that keeps the reader engaged. Now, this can be as high level as chapter hooks that get the reader to turn the next page to sentence and paragraph hooks that keep the reader reading throughout the entire narrative and the entire story. Now, the other part of this is commercial importance. If you're a person who's querying agents or querying publishers, then from a marketability perspective, a strong hook can be a selling point to agents, publishers, and readers, and it can also keep them reading when they get that first chapter, those first few chapters of your manuscript. It can get them wanting to know what's next and wanting to know what you're doing with that story. And that can lead to, publisher acceptance, agent acceptance, or just a really happy reader. So let's look at some examples of effective hooks. Now, I'm going to share only a couple of them. I'm going to share you an opening line example and an example of what I think is a great premise that worked really well, and it's a great hook. The first opening line example is from A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. It's one of my favorite books, but the opening line packs a lot of information that gets you as the reader invested in the story way beyond even the first chapter. And it starts like this. I am doomed to remember a boy with a wrecked voice. not because of his voice, or because he was the smallest person I ever knew, or even because he was the instrument of my mother's death, but because he is the reason I believe in God. There are all kinds of questions that first line raises that I want to know the answer to. And that first line got me to reading that book, and also The Execution by John Irving of hooks further throughout the story kept me reading that book all the way to the end. It's fantastic. Okay. Now, the next example I'm going to give you is of a premise. It's of a romance novel where the premise seems like something that really wouldn't work that well, right? And the premise example is this. The love interest, the male love interest, is on death row, while the female love interest is accompanying her father as he preaches in prison, and the inmate offers to marry her to give her the protection of being a widow. He's on death row. He's going to die. She's going to be protected by being a widow. Only then he's pardoned, and it turns out to be a duke. And now they have to figure out how to make their marriage work, because he didn't die. She's not a widow. Now they're married. The title of that book is My One and Only Duke by Grace Burroughs, and it's a fabulous romance that has an incredible premise, but also incredible hooks throughout the book that keep you reading page after page. Okay? Well, how do you craft a hook in the first place? How do you make one? Well, first of all, be clear and concise. This should be easy for the reader to spot and understand, but it should be immediately compelling to them. Right? You notice the hooks up above are really simple hooks. Like there's not really any long words. There's not anything complicated. There's not anything I don't understand. It just raises questions about the story, okay? Or raises questions about what happens next. So be clear and concise, and be compelling, okay? Next, focus on the unexpected. A surprise for the reader with something unusual, whether it's plot, character, setting, whatever that may be. That unexpected thing, that unexpected hook can be the thing that keeps the reader reading. And last of all, we kind of talked about it, but emotional engagement. Aim to evoke curiosity, excitement, fear, or sympathy in your reader. All of those things are great hooks and will keep your reader reading. Now, if you want a resource that will show you more about how to write hooks and how that works, I would highly recommend this book, Hooked, by Les Edgerton. Okay, this book will talk to you about all kinds of different hooks, how and where to place them in fiction, and how to keep readers reading page after page. So it's highly recommended. We'll drop a link to that in the description below. So, the importance of hooks in fiction. Why does it matter? Because it keeps your reader reading. It gets them reading in the first place. It can even get them to buy your book before they even read the first page. So, experiment with different kind of hooks. See what works best in your stories. Analyze stories that you know and love, and see how that author has used hooks, and then use those techniques in your own fiction. And that's all for this time, everybody. We hope you've answered your question about what are hooks. If you have any other questions or comments, be sure to drop them below. We'll check back and we'll answer every one of them. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.